Hello, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace. This is Adam DM.
Hello.
And today we have completely different topics. Like your topic is completely different from mine.
Sometimes they overlap, but sometimes they absolutely do not.
And today's one of those episodes, so strap in for a bit of fun, different spectrums. It'll be interesting.
I'm not sure how fun mine is. It's interesting. I will say that I'm going to be covering
mine
disaster.
Is not fun either.
Okay, so strap in, I guess, just in general, or strap on, if you will. I'm going to be covering the Mgm Grand Fire. Robin, what are you going to be covering?
I'm going to be covering some TikTok killers.
TikTok killers, like they use clocks to kill people?
No, like
TikTok, the social media?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So yours are definitely going to be more contemporary.
Yep.
Yeah, they are pretty different. So it should be interesting. And I believe I'm going to be going first. Before we get to that, Robin, how has your past week been? Has it been good?
I assume so. I don't remember too much of it. I feel like I haven't really done a bunch.
What I remember mainly is that we went up to see my buddy Mike, which was super fun. I haven't seen him in like a decade, actually. So shout out to Mike. I know he doesn't really listen. Garrett does, though, so you can pass along that message the next time you talk to him. Or the next time I talk to him, I'll just tell him, hey, you got to listen to episode 226. I gave you a shout out. So they were very gracious to let us come over. We just hung out and bullshitted and ate pizza and drank beer. So
yeah, that was cool.
It was a pretty fun time. And then Sunday, I think you went out and had like a fancy dinner, and I stayed home. So
it reminded me of hanging out with all my Vietnamese family at like a big wedding or event or something like that. It was interesting.
Right on. So fun stuff. Aside from that, it's just been work, like Rihanna says. So I don't actually know any of the other lyrics of that song.
Is that a Rihanna song?
I'm pretty sure, yeah. So whatever. It's been all right. So could be worse. I guess we're just grateful for the fact that it wasn't too bad. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into my topic for the show. So this week, it's been honestly really hard to get motivated. It's been like a long freaking week already, y'all. And it's fucking Monday. But anyways, I went to the list that we have and scrolled through until I found something that sort of floated my boat. Not really floats my boat, but it's exciting and it's interesting to cover. So in that way, shape, or form, then yeah, I guess it floats my boat.
All right.
I'm not like, yeah, hotel fires, massive boner or anything like that. I will say it is interesting. However, there's a lot of people that did pass away, and there's some folks out there who might know someone who was associated with this. So I'm going to go through this and just basically give you the facts of what happened and what led to these particular things. So we're going to dive into it. I present to you, dear listener, the Mgm Grand Fire. So this is
the fire grand, or was the hotel grand?
The hotel is called the Mgm Grand, like the one from Las Vegas, Nevada.
Okay,
where
so this
we have
one's
both
going to
lived
be
for a decade.
So this one's going to be in Vegas.
This is in Vegas. It's a disaster topic, and it's in Vegas, so it does hit kind of close to home, but it is from a different era. I'm not going to save all the disasters for a specific month, although I do like doing themed months. I don't like hanging on to topics that I'm like excited to tell for, 5 or 6 months. So I'm just going to sort of just toss them in there as I feel that, it's fit or that the time is right or whatever. I did consider waiting for the anniversary of this particular fire to cover it. In fact, I thought about that last year and then I forgot and I missed the anniversary and I don't feel like waiting several months. So rather than wait until the correct month, I'm just going to tell the tale now. So the MGM is one of the largest hotels on the Strip in Las Vegas today. And back in November of 1980, this was also the case. Y'all remember 1980, right? Not sure if we've covered 1980 before. It feels like we've covered all the years in the 80s, but hey, let's go over 1980 again just in case we didn't. In 1980, the average cost of a new house was $68,700. For those of you shopping for a house, you know what that is.
Must be nice.
It's fucking nuts. The average monthly rent across the U.S. was $300.
And now it's like $2,000.
Yep, it is nuts. Gas was $1.19 a gallon.
And now it's $6.
The average, well, it depends on where you're at, but yeah. And the average yearly income was $19,500. So definitely less money in the pockets of people. So things did cost less.
Yep.
Pac-Man was released in arcades around the world.
Hot.
People that enjoyed playing Pac-Man had a specific name for it. It was called Pac-Man Fever. It really was. Not just making that up. Aside from that, The Empire Strikes Back hit theaters. My favorite Star Wars movie, and I still think one of the best sequels of all time. That's just my personal opinion, though. Everyone who watched the TV show Dallas, if y'all remember Dallas, got to find out who shot JR. Spoilers, it was Kristen Shepard. Side note, the whole TV event
spoilers
of Who Shot Mr. Burns from The Simpsons, of course, was based on Who Shot JR, which I did not realize when I was a kid. I eventually realized it the older I got. So if you're thinking, dang, 1980 kicked all sorts of ass, that sounds pretty sweet. I should also mention that the year wasn't all good. Mount St. Helens erupted, killing 57 people and destroying tons of landscape and towns nearby. A heat wave hit the U.S., especially in the South, causing 1,117 deaths across 20 states.
Wow.
It's one of the worst heat waves in recent history in the United States. And John Lennon was assassinated by an asshole whose name too many people remember, including myself, who I don't feel like repeating because I don't like glorifying murderers. Except we do a true crime podcast, so it's kind of hard not to. But in this particular case, fuck that guy. I'm not saying his name. Anyways, John Lennon was 40 years old when he died. It's kind of crazy because I remember thinking about how young, people always say like, oh my God, they were so young. And when I was a kid and I found out who John Lennon was and that he was dead, I heard from like my parents about like the day John Lennon died and how they felt and stuff like that. And I've seen it depicted in movies. It's depicted in Mr. Holland's Opus, if you've ever seen that, and like how impactful it was to people who love music. And you always hear stuff like, they're so young. And writing this one in particular, I was like, oh, John Lennon died in 1980. He was 40 years old. It made me think like it feels different now because I'm 3 years away from being 40 years old, you know, and thinking like how much more a person has to accomplish past the year of 40, especially someone who is so incredibly talented. It is, this horrible tragedy that happened in 1980. And that is very sad. That said, that's not all that happened in 1980. 1980 also has another very notable event that occurred on November 21st. That's not really where the story starts, though. The story starts in the early 70s, namely 1973, when the Mgm Grand was under construction. It had been proposed, planned, put under construction, and 1973 is when the majority of the construction was taking place. During that time, fire codes were very different back then. Some things were required and other things were sort of recommended. The MGM had its construction designed to isolate a fire to prevent it from spreading to all parts of the structure. It also had a fire detection, suppression, and alarm system installed in the event a fire were to take place, and its HVAC system, which is important in the Las Vegas Valley, as we all know, was designed to stop the inflow of air during a fire, hopefully preventing it from spreading by essentially suffocating it, which is very important to not provide a fire oxygen because it does thrive on that.
Right.
There were many things that were recommended, but were not considered, basically. It was stated that there's so many things that people can say, you probably should do this, but if it's not required, hotel management basically looks at it and says, it's an additional cost, and we're not going to do that. And in most of these cases, if not all, hotel management believed these costs to be excessive, and then of course it became political, as all things do. That whole idea of it's the US, it's a free country, who gives a shit about a sprinkler system was definitely very prevalent in people's minds because hey, they're a business and they're trying to reduce costs.
Right.
Who's the government to overstep and mandate something like safety? Keep in mind, the MGM Grand was under construction 1973. This is around 15 years before seatbelts became mandatory. So safety wasn't really a concern as long as you could spend money. And people felt like anyone who was trying to keep them safe by regulating it were basically overstepping their bounds.
So everyone driving a car back in the day was just like willy-nilly, no seatbelts?
I sincerely have no fucking idea. Like, was there any sort of like seatbelt apparatus back in the day? Or was it just like, nope, nothing. Like just get in the car and go. You're not in a race car. And even then, wonder what they had. I think they had the 5-point harness, but that wasn't required either. Anyways, those decisions made in 1973 became relevant again on November 21st, 1980. Now, in areas of the structure that was considered to be 24 hours, because casinos and hotels, especially in Las Vegas, they are 24 hours, they had limited amounts of fire prevention, even less than probably what was required in this particular case, because it was assumed that a fire would be detected easier because it's 24 hours.
Okay.
People are going to be there. They're just going to yell, yo, there's a fire. Not only had they done the bare minimum when it came to safety, but they also didn't do a good job, if a job at all, of keeping things up to code for what was installed in 1973. This is 7 years later, A restaurant known as The Deli had an electrical issue that I will detail later that resulted in a fire starting. It was in an area that was designated as a 24-hour area. The problem was that the deli was not open or occupied at the time.
What?
So the fire started there and quickly began to spread.
So if it's a 24-hour area, why was it not occupied?
It's just like anytime you go into a casino and there's something that's supposed to be 24 hours, but it's closed, you know? Maybe it's for maintenance, maybe they're adding something in. And, you know, that means that their entire system of, well, someone will always be there at all times was complete bullshit because that wasn't going to happen. So you may say, what about how the hotel was designed to prevent spreading? Surely that helped. Well, those particular sections were supposed to remain closed, and they were not. In most cases, they were remaining open, and in some cases, they were left open but covered. Of course, they were covered with flammable materials. When I read that, I could only imagine like a door that's supposed to seal to prevent like a fire from coming through. And at the same time, while it was sealed, it had like beads hanging in it. Like my cousin had a door that they took off the hinges and just put beads on their door instead of having an actual door. That's what I pictured when I read flammable material, like covering this instead of actually having it closed, which is, you know, unfortunate for what's about to happen. Definitely not the smartest of moves. The recommendations that were made for what materials to use in the structure were also not followed. In the case of the ceiling and the attic areas, those recommendations were absolutely ignored, and the material that was used had high flame spread and smoke ratings, which is just really a bad thing to put into a place that has like zero fire safety measures involved. Luckily, the furnishings on the floor of the casino in this particular area were highly flammable. And in addition to being flammable, they are made of a material that produced toxic smoke when burned.
So everyone would just choke and die on it.
Pretty much. They didn't care about that stuff because it was cheap. But all of these things add up to a recipe for a massive disaster. Another problem, the fire alarm system that they thought was good enough to substitute for a sprinkler system was actually itself not fireproof. So when this fire started, it disabled the alarm system that would have alerted people to a fire. Have I mentioned, as a side note, that the Towering Inferno used to give me nightmares as a kid? It's a movie about being trapped in a burning building on the higher floors.
That's a real thing?
It's a real movie. It's hard to watch. Like, if you're afraid of heights or fires or both, then it's definitely a movie that will trigger you, and I'm afraid of heights.
Do they survive?
I've always had. Some of them do, some of them don't. There's a scene in that movie, spoiler alert, it's from like the 70s, but this guy like decides he's going to run to get help. He talks about like, I used to run track in high school. And he like wets down a towel, he wraps it around his head, and he tries to run through the flames. He gets like halfway through his room before he is consumed and dies in front of the person he's trying to save. I still remember that scene to this day. And sometimes I still have the nightmare that I used to have, except nowadays the building's not on fire. I'm in an elevator that just continues to rise and rise and rise, like past the top floor. And I just like shoot out of the building. As ridiculous as it sounds. Is that more of
a fear of like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory?
No, not really. Like, I don't really think about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It's just a fear of falling. And the idea of being like shot up into the sky is kind of what like triggers the whole fear of like, I have to come down at some point. So anyways, we're not talking about my dreams, but Towering Inferno was definitely one that messed with me as a kid. And this is something that has very similar vibes. All this to say that when the restaurant known as The Deli caught fire at 7:07 a.m. on Friday, November 21st in the year of 1980, that fire spread very, very quickly. It moved outside of the unoccupied restaurant area with shocking quickness. So when all this pops off, there are just over 5,000 people in the hotel/casino between the guests and the workers. I should also mention the MGM Grand here is 26 stories tall at this time.
Okay.
There was a crew working on tile in this particular area, and they noticed the lights were flickering and went to check the deli to investigate to see if it was also experiencing the same issue and noticed smoke coming out of it. Another employee in the building around that exact same time at 7:07, who was working in a bakery that was adjacent to the deli, also noticed that there was smoke coming from the vents. And immediately after noticing it, the lights went out. So if you look up and you see a vent and you see smoke pouring through it and then the lights go out, you know something is seriously wrong. So both the construction workers that found the smoke and the bakery employees that noticed this notify MGM security of the situation, and by 7:17, the Clark County Fire Department were responding to the call and sent engines to the fire.
That's good.
So within 10 minutes, they had sent out the call like, we have a fire, we need help. This is amazing. The first fire engine arrived at 7:19. It took them 120 seconds from when they got the call to get a fire engine to the casino. Like, they were there. That is one hell of a response time.
I mean, I'm sure there was no traffic at that time,
It's,
you know?
like, looking at the strip back then,
different time.
it's super empty, yeah. So they definitely had something very nearby. And despite that, things are still going to go very wrong. So by 7:30 a.m., Las Vegas Metro Police had requested all available helicopters in the area to come to the MGM Grand immediately. And we're going to get into why. So the fire spread very fast. All those contributing factors that I've mentioned, combined with the wallpaper, PVC piping, and plastic mirrors all being incredibly flammable, meant the fire started spreading at a rate of 19 feet per second once it got out of the deli. 19 feet.
That's like jumping across this whole room in half a second.
Imagine
like that's
a 19-foot room, and then imagine how long a second is, and that's how long it took a fire to just rage through it. That is super fast. That's a wall of fire moving at 13 miles an hour within a building.
Oof.
The fire swept through the building in a westward direction, meaning it basically was starting to cover the casino floor. From the time it was first noticed, it had actually engulfed the entire casino within 6 minutes. It moved so quickly that a fireball literally blew out the doors on the main entrance of the casino. Individuals walking by on the strip saw this massive fireball blow out the doors and windows, and a massive column of smoke start pouring out of the windows and doors of the casino and just rising up. Very quickly, it must have looked like basically someone blew up the first floor of the MGM Grand, but it was just a fire that moves so quick because there's no prevention at all.
So all those people died.
Everything is flammable. So basically everyone on the floor that wasn't able to escape in time did pass away. I'll get to the numbers after this. So the HVAC system that was supposed to cut off the affected area somehow managed to keep functioning during the fire, literally feeding it fresh oxygen that it needed to expand rapidly. So individuals that were walking by on the strip see all of this happening. Of course, there's more and more calls pouring in, begging like the police and the fire department to help. But basically everyone's there at the time, so they enlist the help of like Henderson, North Las Vegas. They reached out to Nellis Air Force Base to have their helicopters show up as well. And it's this giant concerted effort to try and save as many people as possible in the hotel. The elevators did not have a safety feature installed that would return guests to the first floor if something was wrong, so they could safely evacuate. The smoke and these toxic fumes from the materials being burned filled the entire hotel, and they started creeping into the sections that were supposed to be quote-unquote safe from the whole way the hotel is designed to prevent the fire from spreading. The smoke crept up into the rooms, the stairwells, and the elevator shafts. It poured smoke through the air vents all over the hotel, so the ventilation system is basically providing smoke to all the rooms at this point.
It's just like feeding all of these toxic fumes everywhere? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
So the only way guests could get out was the stairwells, and the stairwells only had access points on the street level and the roof.
What?
If you went into the stairwells, the self-locking doors basically trapped you in there, and those stairwells were completely filled with smoke. So a lot of people went in there hoping to get out, and it was a literal death trap. The guests who stayed in their rooms went to their balconies, if they had them, and they hung clothing or bed sheets outside on their like balcony railings to alert rescue workers to their locations so they could be rescued. The firefighters below had ladders that only allowed them to reach the 9th floor, leaving the top 17 floors to basically fucking figure it out until they got there. I have no idea, and I realized that when I was reading this, like, if you're in a high-rise fire, I don't know how high they can get to you, aside from they just send people in to come get you, which they did in this case as well. So individuals who didn't have balconies smashed open their windows, and that's unfortunate because these massive columns of smoke and toxic fumes were rising up, and it actually let more smoke into their rooms when they did that. Some tied bed sheets together and attempted to escape with a makeshift rope. One guy actually had a really long rope in his room, tied it off to his balcony, and managed to shimmy his way down the rope to the ground floor and survived because of it. Yeah. A nearby expansion... Why did
he have so much rope in his room?
I don't know.
That's terrifying.
When I read that, and this is more, but when I read that, I was like, what if this dude bought a bunch of rope because he was going to hang himself?
Oh.
And he was like, fuck it, I'm just going to buy some rope and I'm going to do this in a nice hotel room. And then this popped off. He's like, you know what? Fuck that. I want to live. And he used the rope to escape. But either way, this guy got out just fine. That said, there was a nearby expansion that was currently being built on the MGM, which was underway and had workers actively working at the time the fire took place. And a single worker, I shouldn't say a single because I can't confirm that. It sounds like it's a single worker based off of what I've read, but it could be multiple workers that had scaffolding lifts, were able to retrieve guests who had fled to their balconies and lower them to ground level, making multiple trips in an effort to save as many folks as possible. The helicopters that were called in were extremely effective because Nellis Air Force Base there were other helicopters that also assisted. In total, the helicopters evacuated just over 1,000 people from the roof of the MGM Grand, some 26 stories in the sky. And the sky was filled with smoke. Like, I'm going to post pictures of this, and there's a picture of, like, the MGM Grand where you can't even see the fire. It's just engulfed in smoke, and there's helicopters circling the roof and this black column of smoke that can choke out their engines, you know?
Right.
And they're still going in there to save people.
It looks pretty freaking dark.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. And not everyone was so lucky. Like, I've basically told you about the people that survived up to this point. A total of 588 guests were injured, with 25 employees and 14 firefighters being injured as well. 78 guests and 7 employees died in the fire. On the casino floor, a total of 18 people died in the initial fire and were not able to escape the floor when the fire spread very, very rapidly. A group of individuals who were in an elevator at the time the fire happened became trapped in that elevator and were unable to get out. When the firefighters discovered the car and tried to free them, all 10 occupants had died already of smoke inhalation. So they were basically just trapped in this elevator shaft that filled with smoke.
That's so sad, dude. You just... the idea that you kind of just suffocate in there.
I probably should have put a trigger warning on this one, because, like, thinking of this makes me feel, like, anxious. Like, it's claustrophobia, it's the idea of suffocating, and those are two things that, like, actually bother me. So I'll continue to go on, but just an idea is, like, I'm just going to describe, like, the total amounts and, like, cause of death per the coroner. So 61 of the deaths total came on the 19th to 24th floor. So 5 of the top floors of the hotel, mostly in the stairwells. 1 individual died from jumping from his room window. Those that did survive by going to the roof had to enter the stairwell and head upwards, where the smoke was at its most concentrated, and they had to make their way past so many people. One of the accounts that I read of the fire is from a firefighter who made his way into the stairwell and was trying to carry people to the roof to get them evacuated. And he stated, quote, "Carrying people up to the roof was an experience I'll never forget. The people we were taking up there were dead. Were bodies," end quote.
What?
Because they can't tell what's going on because it's so dark. All they know is they're finding people that are collapsed in the stairwell, picking them up, carrying them to the roof, and getting them up there to basically realize they've already died.
That's so sad.
So this is just like a true nightmare. From what I've read, 2 individuals who escaped the hotel later died of smoke inhalation, which is just so tragic that you're able to make it out, but enough damage had already been done to your body and your lungs that you just weren't able to survive from it. When the incident was reviewed after the fact, it was revealed that the only system to prevent a fire or prevent it from spreading that worked properly was the fucking sprinkler system that had actually been installed in a small section of the hotel as a method for prevention for the fire from spreading. So basically, all the things they put in to prevent putting in a full sprinkler system failed, and the sprinkler system they barely put in is what kept it from reaching the other floors and basically burning the hotel to the fucking ground.
Wow.
Clark County's fire chief at the time had been concerned that this exact thing could happen, and for years had ordered that a secondary fire hose be put into the MGM Grand showrooms for years up to that point. The governor of Nevada at the time, Robert List, was quoted as saying, quote, "You can't force people to bring hotels up to code when those codes didn't exist when they were built," end quote. It's like, you fucking kidding me? It was built 7 years before the incident. It's not a century ago. It's 7 years. I pissed 7 years. Like, get out of here.
What?
Multiple fire safety violations had been discovered in April of 1980, 7 months prior to the fire. Upon the last inspection before the blaze that took place in June of 1980, only 20% of the violations that had been discovered in April had actually been brought up to code or corrected. The other 80% were just left. They're just like, nah, fuck it, we'll get to it when we feel like it, which is just baffling. The fire was started by poor workmanship on a refrigerated pastry display case that was added after the fact. They built the deli, then they added this thing after the fact. Rather than adding a display case that was a standalone unit, they basically added like a walk-in fridge that would operate as a display case and like wired it to pre-existing wiring through a conduit that wasn't supposed to have it in there. And because they didn't secure it, it basically had a bunch of friction where it was rattling around for months until it wore through the metal casing. That metal casing, when it was installed, was up to code because that metal casing was the ground for the electrical. Once it had rattled to the point of erosion, it didn't exist anymore, which meant there was no ground, which meant that the electrical that was now exposed started to arc repeatedly until it just basically smoldered the wall. And when it finally got some oxygen to it, it just erupted into this ball of flame.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Like, that is just nuts. Physics, and all that science stuff is insane. It's just like all that friction wears something away, and then electricity can be freed from its confines.
This is why safety regulations exists in the first place. There was so many things that were done when it was being built and after the fact that if it had just been done correctly, would have prevented the literal deadliest disaster in Nevada history.
That's the deadliest disaster in Nevada history.
Yes, it is.
Is it really?
Yes, it is.
Wow.
When all was said and done, 1,350 lawsuits were filed against those involved with the construction of the MGM Grand and those deemed responsible for what had happened to those within the building. It wound up being around a $223 million settlement, although I know there's been multiple settlements after the fact, which would be around $768 million today. That would be about $165,000 per claim, or $568,000 in today's US dollars. So for each person that filed a claim, they got $568,000. I read that more was put into a claim like pool, and then by like 1998, there was still like $440 million that was there to pay people out that had not been claimed, and they wound up donating it to like fire and burn victims within the Clark County. And I thought it was just like baffling that there's people out there that probably suffered from it that they set aside money for, and $440 million worth of it just didn't get claimed. So in case you were wondering, a full sprinkler system that was recommended to be installed but not enforced in the entire hotel, it would have cost $192,000. It's estimated that after the settlements, the amount of damage that needed to be repaired, and the lost revenue from the closure of the hotel and casino, the MGM lost just north of $1 billion. Billion with a B. That's $1,000 million. For anyone wondering, you could have bought 5,208 sprinkler systems with that amount of money instead of just one, which would have done the job and still had around halfway towards the 5,209th sprinkler system. Interestingly enough about this entire thing and how tragic it was and how high profile it was, is that it did not inspire a change in the fire regulations. It took another fire that took place 4 months later at the Las Vegas Hilton that killed 8 people for them to finally introduce a bill to require sprinklers in the hotel rooms and front and back of house. To that point, in those 4 months between this MGM Grand fire and the next fire that killed a bunch of people, all that had been done was the governor had formed a commission to investigate if other hotels needed to be brought up to code. That's all that was done.
What? They couldn't have just been like, no.
Come up to code. Every fucking one of you has to come up to code. Nope. They thought it was just, overstepping their bounds a bit too much, even though, hundreds of people were injured and almost 100 people died. Even after the bill was introduced in February, it still got argued and debated and delayed for 4 months in the Nevada government before it was passed. The opponents of the bill believed it should be left to the local government to regulate it, while the local government didn't believe that regulating these things was necessary. But the bill did pass in June of 1981, thank God. If you're wondering if the building is still in operation, because everyone knows the MGM is still around, it actually is. The main building where all those people died, the original hotel tower where most of the deaths occurred, it's still in operation. It was actually sold in 1986 to Bally's Manufacturing. It is now known as Bally's Las Vegas.
Oh.
That is the location of where this actually happened. A new MGM Grand was opened in Las Vegas in 1993. That is the one we know and love.
That's the green one.
On Las Vegas Boulevard and Trop. Okay. That is the green one. Indeed.
So it's not haunted by the souls of all those that are lost.
I'm sure there's people that have passed away that could be haunting it. But if you're staying in Bally's, you're staying in a tower that's had close to 100 people die from a fire in it. So it's one of those disasters that if you were alive for it, you probably remember it almost certainly. If you weren't, though, you may have never heard of it. Like, shit, I've lived in Las Vegas for over 10 years. I had no idea this existed until like last July when I found it when I was looking for topics. So if you knew, hopefully I did the topic justice during my research. And if you don't know, now you know. And that, my spooky friends, is the Mgm Grand Fire.
Thank you for that horrifying tidbit.
You're welcome. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I didn't trigger anyone too hard. So before we move into Robin's topic, we're going to take a quick commercial break.
All right. Welcome to my half of the episode. This week, I wanted to cover something that is, like Adam was saying, much more modern, much more contemporary. And with the rise of social media, there are so many deaths that can be attributed to social media. And it's whether it's like social media influencers themselves or like that pressure to perform, it's just a lot of different things that have kind of stemmed from this new addiction we all have to social media.
I know there's also been like people who have, had such pressure put on them from other folks through social media that they've done something or taken their own lives,
Yeah.
Like I think the Slender Man thing that you've covered in the past kind of reminds me of like this whole idea because it's something that came from creepypasta. Mm-hmm. It was like perpetuated online until like two people, actually I think it was multiple people, but in that particular case, they just sort of absorbed it through a channel that probably wouldn't have existed back in like the time when I covered my topic.
Yeah, pretty much. So for those of you that have been living under a rock for the past couple of years, TikTok has been growing in popularity, and there's no way you haven't seen a viral TikTok.
Can you describe to the old people what I'm saying that as myself, what TikTok is comparatively speaking?
I feel like TikTok is just short videos of people doing stuff, and that's whether it's dances or singing or I don't know, recipes. I put Gundams together and I put it on TikTok.
I have never made a TikTok video. I have a TikTok account of which I am very proud, and all I do is watch Keith Habersberger shove food in his face, and then I watch I think a few cute animal videos. I watch your Gundam videos, and then I watch like some recipes. And that's all I have on my TikTok. Like the whole idea of like challenges, I think it's a weird thing to call them that. It's just like a trend. It's like someone starts doing something that looks fun.
So everybody starts doing it.
Yeah, it's like when Jackass came out during my generation, then everyone started recording their own Jackass videos and then sending them into like all these different clip shows.
Yeah, so TikTok is just a home for things that will eventually probably go viral. I don't know. But those crazy dances you see people doing in public, those are probably for TikTok. Weird videos you see people recording in public, it's probably for TikTok. But as I was typing out my script, Microsoft Word kept correcting how I was typing TikTok to capital T, tick, capital T, talk.
So Microsoft Word autocorrects to the proper spelling
to
of TikTok.
TikTok.
Wow, that's
I was like,
it's crazy.
How has this become such a huge thing that Microsoft doesn't even capitalize the M in Microsoft? It doesn't. I was like, are you freaking kidding me?
That is funny.
But it's just insane how huge this has become. But anyway, there have been a number of murders that have been attributed to this incredibly popular social media platform. So I thought I'd share a couple of those with you today. It's not necessarily attributed to the platform itself. I want to put that out there. It's just these people are known from TikTok, and they just end up doing things that are not so good. They're not.
There's just the overlap with the fact that they're TikTok known.
Yeah.
And then things go wrong.
So the first one I'm going to tell you guys about is that of Claire Miller. So Claire Miller was 14 and is better known as Spirits and Such Consulting on TikTok.
Okay.
And it's an account that had garnered millions of views and 22,000 followers, though it's not sure exactly if that's like an inflated number from all this stuff popping off, right?
Gotcha.
So she's probably more famous for stabbing her sister.
Wow.
To death.
Oh my God, that got so much worse.
So from Claire's videos, it kind of seems like she lived in a loving household. a loving family. She was in 9th grade at Lancaster County Day School. Small private school, around like 550 students. It's tiny. And that
is bigger than the school I went to.
550 students?
I think when I was in my senior year, our like entire school had like just over 500 kids, maybe less actually.
What?
Yeah.
The entire school?
My graduating class was like 120. And I think we were the biggest class at the time, which would have made us less than 500 actually. So yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, thanks for calling it tiny, bro. Jeez.
Sorry. Okay.
It was tiny.
So they lived in a 2,500 square foot home, which is bigger than any house I could ever hope to afford here in the state of California.
Oh shit, right?
The house was actually bought under the name Helen M. Miller, Irrevocable Trust. So it was actually bought under a trust for Helen Miller, Claire's sister.
Okay.
And why that is done, you may ask, is because Helen, who was 19, had cerebral palsy. So by putting it under this trust, it ensures that she'll get care for, however long. I guess if her parents pass, the house is under her, so she'll get care. I don't know. But it's pretty common practice. I did not know that was a thing.
I did not either.
But yeah, apparently it's pretty common. And today you learned if you had no idea as well. So to many that were around Claire, she kind of seemed like a good student. She had a friendly personality. She was co-president of her 9th grade class.
Wow.
And was a pretty active participant in school activities. But she was also on TikTok. On February 22nd, 2021, at 1:08 a.m., a call was received by Manheim Township Dispatch, and it was what has been described as a hysterical caller, a quote-unquote hysterical caller, that claimed that she had just killed her sister.
Oh my God.
So police arrive 5 minutes after dispatch first starts talking to this caller. And when they arrive, Claire is standing in the front yard wearing PJs, blue shirt. It's a blue t-shirt with like a cat's face on it, checkered pajama pants, and they're all covered in blood. She was reported to have just kept repeating over and over again that I stabbed my sister. She just kept saying that over and over again. She had been rubbing her hands in the snow, like seemingly to like kind of get the blood off of her hands. And she just was desperately trying to get it off her hands. And it wasn't her blood. It was the blood of her sister that she had just murdered, or stabbed. But Claire was responding to officers and was saying that Helen was still laying in bed, and she took them to the room, pointed them where the bedroom was, and was telling them that she had stabbed her repeatedly. Like, she was just telling them, like, everything that happened. The parents apparently were completely unaware of anything that was going on. They didn't wake up until police came in. Wow. So they didn't hear anything. Claire had attempted to wash off her sister's blood in the sink with some soapy water, and it didn't help, obviously. When police stepped into the bedroom, they found her sister lying there with a stab wound. She was lying there on her back with, like, a bloody pillow over her face. And when police, took the pillow off, the knife was still stuck in her neck,
Jesus
right
Christ.
above her chest. Yeah. And it was a messy scene, apparently. And she had been stabbed multiple times, like she was telling police. Despite attempts at reviving Helen, she was declared dead at 4:13 a.m. So she died a few hours later. She had succumbed to her stab wounds, and Claire was taken into custody at the scene. She was there, obviously saying that she was the one that did it, so they arrested her. An unnamed friend of Claire's spoke to her that night, apparently, and told police they'd actually talked to police at 1:40 something a.m. that day, and told the police that they'd talked to her and that she had suicidal and homicidal thoughts during their conversation. So she had been harboring these feelings. So she must have snapped, and it just kind of led her to do this. No one's really sure exactly why she did it. Some say this murder occurred just a day after having gone viral on TikTok, but I can't verify that myself. Different sites say that her videos during that time period seem to involve her venting about her dad, though there is a good amount of videos that refer to like violent anime, violent video games. But like, as somebody who watches anime and plays video games, I'm like, okay, people just want to say like, oh, there's something about her videos.
People have always been looking for a scapegoat when it comes to unexplainable violent behavior. Like, it must have been inspired by something else. It's like, that is not how that works. Like, someone has something wrong with them, and it doesn't matter what they're into. It's something that pushes them over the edge that cannot be explained. And you can't blame a video game or a movie or a cartoon or book. I
remember when people were like, it's the Marilyn Manson records that they're listening to.
And they didn't even listen to Marilyn Manson.
So she is being tried in the state of Pennsylvania as an adult, even though she's 14. Because Pennsylvania is one of a handful of states that if you are 10 and up, you are charged and tried as an adult. If it's a homicide case. So if you kill someone, you're immediately tried as an adult. And the difference is, like, if you are tried in juvenile court, they'll try to rehabilitate you. If you're tried in adult court, you get years.
Right.
Years of, prison time. So she was held in adult prison without bail. So I guess in the state of Pennsylvania, if you are taken in for homicide, you are not allowed out on bail.
Wow.
Which is interesting.
That is different than a lot of states.
Right. And her TikTok account has since been removed. Supposedly, it was taken down because of a post that she had made a day before the stabbing. She made a post. TikTok had to suspend her account. And it's believed that the post violated TikTok's guidelines for forbidding users to promote or are engaged in violence. So if it has anything to do with that, they're like, no. And that's why her account got suspended. And I'm sure after this, it just got taken down completely.
Right.
But yeah, that is the TikTok case for Claire Miller.
That's kind of crazy and very, very sad for sure.
Yeah. So the next one is the story of the Yandere Freak. And of course, this is another TikTok influencer. This one is an influencer that is far more famous than Claire Miller was. So this is like a TikTok famous cosplayer. And
for those who don't know, and I can't imagine there's a lot of them out there, Robin, but can you tell people what cosplaying is?
Cosplay, it's just like they dress up and as different characters. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an anime character. It's just it's like fancy Halloween costumes, It's like,
it doesn't have to be restricted to Halloween or anything like that.
I mean, it's costume play. You dress up as these different characters.
Some people are incredibly impressive too. Like, they look just like them.
What's so annoying about this one is they go by they them pronouns. This killer does, but they are incredibly talented at cosplay. They are so good at it. All their different cosplays look so good. But we'll get into the nitty gritty of this, despite their talent. So their real name is Marianne Oliver Snow, going by Snow sometimes, or Snow the Salt Queen.
Wow.
This is TikTok, okay? This is contemporary stuff. I'm sure they're all like yeet, whatever.
That's as far as Robin's knowledge of like this generation's lingo is yeet, oof.
I'm sure they're like, oh man, that shit slaps. So despite
I feel like that's too old now.
Is it?
I feel like that. I don't know if that's true, but it feels too old.
Despite their TikTok fame, they too are held responsible or accountable for the death of this person. And they shot their friend, Helen Rose Hastings. So Helen was 18 years old, first-year student at Oberlin College in Ohio. Their parents were acclaimed geneticists at Baylor College of Medicine.
Wow.
They were known to be enthusiastic, compassionate. They had an interest in treating misophonia, which is a condition that causes distress due to particular sounds, something that they themselves had to struggle with. So they couldn't stand, I think it was like people chewing. It's like certain things, just they can't handle it. And friends said that despite their issues, their auditory struggles, they were a really bubbly person. They had a great sense of humor. They grew up dealing with being bullied over their medical issues that they could, it's like you can't control that, right? But people bully you anyway. And they also got bullied because they were short. They didn't grow up. They didn't grow past 5'1", I think. And classmates made her life unbearable sometimes. And this led them to kind of build more unhealthy relationships, some abusive relationships. They developed depression, anxiety, and even an eating disorder. So they ended up turning to cosplay. And this cosplay community kind of helped pull them out of their isolation and help them build relationships with these new friends. And this cosplay was kind of a form of escapism too, because they could become this other character and kind of get away from themselves. They didn't have to be themselves. They could be whatever they wanted to be. And this cosplay community is where they met Snow, their sophomore year of high school. Snow was 23 at the time of this incident, and their TikTok had like over 1.6 million followers.
Wow.
They're
so many.
An incredibly famous TikTok cosplay, you know what I mean? TikToker, cosplay TikToker. God, all these new terms. I'm like, what does this mean? But Snow and Hastings had been best friends since high school, so both passionate about cosplay. Hastings even ended up living with Snow, so they moved in with them summer of 2020, which is crazy. Everyone's trapped inside, pandemic, all that fun stuff. So I'm wondering if that had something to do with, more uncomfortable relationships. Everyone's so close together, and who knows. But people described Snow as the Regina George of the cosplay community.
Oh my God.
So for those of you that don't know, Regina George likes to start some drama. And
Regina George is a character from the movie Mean Girls.
She is like the leader of the Mean Girls.
Yes.
So
she's manipulative.
The fact that people compare her to Regina George is
a bad thing.
Is bad. So I would also like to point out that yandere is a term to describe someone who is, quote, sometimes affectionate and sometimes wants to kill you, end quote.
Wow.
So the fact that her TikTok is Yandere Freak is just like, weird. It kind of tells you what this person is like. And it's a sign of what they want to be portrayed as. So some described Snow as someone you just didn't feel safe around or that you couldn't necessarily trust. I guess at one point, there was somebody who was running a panel at an anime convention, and they banned Snow from going because there was a bad breakup between Snow and someone that was going to be attending the panel or who was on the panel. And Snow was like super pissed off, so she called security or something and was like, it's an 18+ panel, but I saw a kid in there. Like, they just want to stir up trouble.
Gotcha.
That's the type of person they were. And they posted a video of themselves cosplayed as a scantily clad Junko Enoshima from Danganronpa. Rampa? Fuck. No, I said it right the first time.
Who is that?
You remember, okay, you've been to a lot of anime conventions with me, right?
Yes, I have.
So, do you remember those girls that have the big, crazy pink pigtails?
Yeah, I think so.
The giant, with like the schoolgirl looking outfits?
Yeah.
That's the character that Snow would cosplay the most.
Okay.
And so Danganronpa is an anime where it's about like these students that have to kill each other to escape. That's what the anime is about, apparently.
Okay.
And I've never watched it, okay? I don't know. But so Snow, cosplayed as this character, scantily clad, goes to a cemetery and dances on a grave for a TikTok video.
That's fucked up.
Yeah.
That's super fucked up.
So they even went so far as to lie about getting permission about being able to do this. All right, so the gravekeeper or the family of that has to do with the grave comes out and says, like, they don't have permission to do that. That's a lie. And then so Snow comes out and says, well, I didn't know there was rules about doing this on
You didn't know
graves
there's rules
and
about
stuff like
dancing, literally dancing on someone's grave.
So it's just this, she is not the best person, right? They're just incredibly toxic. And a number of people have come forward with their own personal experiences with Snow and have said that Snow took on the personality of Junko. So the fact that this anime is about killing people to escape makes me think, like, maybe I don't want to spend time with this person, because they would say, like, literally quote, I am her, she is me, we are the same, end quote. That is something that Snow has said.
So if you're identifying with a character that is looking to kill people, there's something seriously wrong there.
Yeah. So January 17th, 2021, at around 1:30 a.m., Hastings and Snow were at Snow's house because they live together now. And according to Snow, everyone at the house at the time, the group of friends, they're all drinking. They're getting pretty drunk. During this drunken hangout, they decide to go grab a gun. Snow goes to grab a gun that her ex-boyfriend had left. And he had told them that he'd taken all the bullets out of it when he moved out. So Snow is playing with it like it's a toy because they think there's nothing in there, right? There's no bullets in there.
Side note, never, fucking ever play with a
guns.
real gun as a toy. Even a toy gun, you really shouldn't point at anyone.
So they tell authorities that they watched the ex-boyfriend take the magazine out of the gun, right? Take all the bullets out. But for those that have spent any time around guns or know anything about guns, is that there's always one left in the chamber. So he should have taken the one in the chamber or checked it or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
But that apparently did not happen. And so Hastings is joking around. The whole group is joking around, playing with this gun for hours, according to Snow. And apparently one person goes like, oh, hey, shoot me. And so Snow pretends to shoot them. And then Hastings...
Who would volunteer to be
Hastings
shot?
says the same thing, like, oh, do me. And so while they're both laughing, Snow says, okay, puts it up to her head and then pulls the trigger. And the gun goes off. Everyone is shocked when Helen falls down to the floor. So it's just what are the odds that this would happen? But at the same time, it was bound to happen if you're playing with a gun, right? Snow calls 911, tells them what happened, saying that it was their fault. Like, Snow was just saying, like, I did this, you know, we were doing this, all this stuff was going on. And Snow tells police that they were high and they were really, really drunk. And when they pulled the trigger, like, they were shocked that it went off. And they were just, it was like, they were just watching a TV show. They were watching Gotham. She wanted to bring this gun out because she was like, oh, I have this gun like the Penguin has in this show. And so it was just like this, I don't even know. But reading how she was telling the police all this stuff, you kind of get like anxiety from it, right? Because I'm sure they're freaking out and the police are like, what is going on? But despite this traumatizing event, Snow continues to make TikTok and Instagram content.
They don't even take a break from making TikTok content after they accidentally murder someone.
Right. And so they keep making videos. Some people say it's like, oh, it's more morbid and more creepy and stuff. And all the videos that they're making are like to make fun of the fact that they killed someone. But a lot of people point out it's just the same content. Because the character that Snow cosplays, Junko, is already morbid. There's lots of blood involved, things like that. So it's more of the same.
Just, again, no respect for the dead in this particular
there
case.
There really is no respect for the dead. But they continue to make content undeterred for months. News doesn't come out about the murder charges until September 28th, 2021. So before this, a lot of the kids that went to school with Helen assumed they'd killed themselves because there was no news about what happened. No one had any idea what was going on until these murder charges come out. So September 28th, 2021, manslaughter charges start coming out. Snow gets charged for it. They change their account to private because now everyone's like, oh, MG, all this stuff, you're making new content still. And top comments included, what a huge, quote, what a huge slap in the face to the families of the victims to be posting like this, end quote. It's like so disrespectful because they keep making content and not saying a single word about what they did.
Right.
So no one has a clue, right? Snow was released on a $20,000 bond after their arrest after being charged with second-degree manslaughter in the state of Texas. The court had them monitored electronically via GPS and given a designated curfew of 8 p.m. to 7 a.m., 7 days a week. They were also required to stay sober and be submitted to drug and alcohol testing. They failed to comply with the bond conditions. So they failed to report to designated meetings. They didn't follow curfew multiple times. They even let their monitoring device die on multiple occasions. So they didn't have GPS or a cell phone signal multiple occasions. So people tried to get this bond reversed, but it didn't happen.
How in the fuck did this person...
They got away with so much stuff.
Get away with so much, and like they violated it in so many ways, and the bond still doesn't get reversed. That's shocking.
It is absolutely shocking. But the second-degree manslaughter charge has a potential prison sentence of 2 to 20 years in the state of Texas. And so Snow got this second-degree manslaughter charge because it was like neglect when they decided to take this gun and hold it up to someone's head and then pull the trigger. Even if they thought it was empty, you know, the act of doing that is manslaughter.
Right.
So Helen's friends over at Oberlin campaigned to have a dogwood tree planted where they spent their first and only semester in college. And the tree is pink. The leaves are pink, just like the color of Helen's hair that semester. So it's so sad. It is
very sad.
An awful thing to happen, but...
And we still don't know the results of the trial because it's still pending?
All this stuff is still pending.
Wow.
It's because it's still going on. It's what is it now? April 2022. This really only happened, I think the hearing for that case happened in October. So it's going to be going on for a while. And the same thing with the Claire Miller case as well. They had their evidence exchange in October. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Still a long ways to go. We're going to have to do a follow-up on this particular one. So I will say it's one thing to cosplay and even to get in character for a character who is not a good person. It's quite another thing to let that extend over into your actual behavior towards other people. It is significantly another thing to accidentally, and I feel like that needs to be put in quotations because we simply do not know, take another person's life and then carry on as if nothing had happened and post incredibly insensitive things despite the fact that that had happened. I understand where a lot of those comments would come from. It also sucks because through social media, people can just be so hateful. And for something so serious, I can only imagine what some of those comments looked like before the account was turned to private. But realistically, like looking at someone continuing to post content immediately after they accidentally kill someone is unreal, man.
The thing about it for me with the whole quote unquote accidental thing is that why would this person be the only one that they decide to pull the trigger for? It doesn't make any sense to me because there are so many people there. Why? If they're playing with it for hours, would it just randomly be this person? And as a lot of people have already come out to say that this person's incredibly manipulative, I kind of want to, I want to say that I assume, that they thought this through and they played it up. I don't know if they tested them for the drugs and the alcohol and all that fun stuff.
I really wonder if it was something that was psychological for them, where it's like, that's a person I wish I could kill, so I'm going to pull the trigger, even though I know the gun's not going to go off. I'm going to pull the trigger so I can know what it feels like, because they are in that specific mindset, and then the gun actually goes off and they were regretful. But that might honestly just be wishful thinking for what I hope was like the cause of such a terrible accident.
Or is it a sense of envy because they live completely different lives?
Right.
Whereas Helen has this really supportive family. They're going to college for neurobiology, things like that. And maybe Snow's not, and they see Helen doing all these things. And it's just like, if I can't do it, you can't do it,
Yeah, I'm sure more is going to come out as the story develops and the trial goes on. But yeah, that one's really, really crazy and kind of sickening, but, morbidly fascinating without a doubt. So good stuff. Good research, Robin.
Thank you. It was an interesting topic.
Indeed. So yeah, I think that's just about everything for episode 226. If you have a story you would like to send to us, can be supernatural, paranormal, true crime, coincidental. Sometimes we get extraterrestrial stuff as well. Feel free to email storytime@scaryish.com or go to our website, scaryish.com, and click on Contact Us. You can fill out that form. It comes directly to us. You can also hit us up on our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. Twitter is @scarishpod, and Instagram is @scarishpodcast. And we got our Instagram back. I lost access to it because I switched my phone and a bunch of bullshit happened, but hey, we got it back, y'all. Super happy about that. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scarishpodcast. Those are monthly donations. Tiers start at $1. I actually posted on Instagram today pictures of some of the new Patreon content, like the rewards that we'll be sending out to Badge of Honor patrons and above, if you want to check that out. And if you're not into the monthly donation type thing, you can also go to ko-fi.com/scaryish podcast, and those are one-time donations.
Indeed. So thank you so much for listening to this particular episode. It means the world to us that we have all of your support. That's just about everything that we're going to have for this, though. And yeah, if you're looking for more content, we record Storytime/Pasta Time Wednesdays, 6:30 p.m. Pacific Time at youtube.com/Scaryish and twitch.tv/Scaryish podcast. So come watch us record it live, or you can listen to the podcast version that comes out on Friday. But yeah, that's everything we got for you. So Robin, why don't you go ahead and sign us out?
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.